I'll just record. It's fine.
All right, cool. That works. Okay, so yeah, hello everybody. Welcome to week 13 of Python DeCal. We were like literally almost done. Damn. So because we're like almost done, we're wrapping up with some really valuable information for all of you. Thank you for coming, and those watching after the fact. I hope that today's lecture will be very valuable. We have a couple announcements that I think Megan's going to take care of first before we get into today's topic.
So we didn't release the homework until like last night. So we'll have it due on Sunday. It's just making a website, so it shouldn't take too long. But please take these like seriously, like along with the resume from last week, because like these aren't really like for us, it's for you, for your future like endeavors in research or even industry. And doing either of these things, actually both, is really helpful in terms of finding research and finding a job. So I would highly recommend like taking these assignments a lot more seriously, maybe even more so than the coding, because these are like important things that everybody should have, and should have like a really good resume and a website. Also, final project deadlines are coming up soon. The due date is 11/30, November 30th, before class. So even if you're not presenting that day, you should have it turned in. We'll have you turn in a zip file of all the code and your presentation. More information will come soon. And also, I highly recommend like taking this week and half of next week to like ask us questions and all of that, since Thanksgiving is next week and we will not have lecture on both of those days. So I recommend like taking use of this time and really working on your projects, since like I will be available, but I don't know how like responsive I will be. And then also all the other instructors also want to like spend time with their family and all of that. But just be mindful of all the deadlines. Also, it's not up here, but any and all assignments, the latest due date is December 9th, which is the last day of our week. And please, if you do submit anything late, email Jonah, Pranati, and Charlie so that they know to grade your stuff. Otherwise, it won't be graded.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan, for those announcements. Just want to piggyback and make sure that I'm like really clear on this. Like those resumes and personal websites, those assignments, we make them for a reason. They are important. Whether or not they feel important right now is whatever, but I'm almost certain that they will help you. Seeing like a LaTeX CV or a LaTeX resume already indicates to whoever you're asking to do research or a job with that you are like familiar with a relevant tool of the trade. If you're going to do research, you're going to have to write papers, and being able to do LaTeX is something that you need to do to be able to write a paper. So showing that you can do that right off the gate with a nicely typed CV is great. And then standing out with a website where in an application, they will probably never see your face. They will see a name and they will see a bunch of text on a screen or on a piece of paper, but they will never see your face. But if you have a website and they click on that website, they will see your face. And that already makes you way more memorable than anybody else. So just remember that. It's a very valuable tool to stand out. And I think it really helps if you take it seriously. Granted, if you do a crappy website and you maybe spend 30 seconds on it, just put a template together and slap your face on it, and it's generic with no text filled in, then yeah, it's not going to help you in any way because they're not going to take that seriously. So if you do it seriously and like put a little bit of effort into it, and I think it'll really benefit you. Yeah, okay, cool. So let's go on with today. Today is all about research and the context of astronomy. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is astronomy related. We're going to talk about astronomy. Not everybody here is astronomy. We get that, but we still think that all these like concepts really apply. And so for those of you that aren't in astronomy, that are in other subfields or other fields of STEM or whatever it may be, just listen to the general ideas that we're talking about, because I think they still apply not just in astronomy, but in physics and chemistry, biology, you name it, data science, it's all there. So if you're going to be doing scientific work, this is very much how research works. And we'd like to kind of demystify it for a lot of you. A lot of you are first, second, third years who have never had research experience, may be coming from a different university, might be coming from high school or whatever, and never have had that experience. So we want to make sure we kind of demystify that whole landscape for you, because research is really incredibly important, but it's not necessarily something that's taught like all the time. So, or like taught to undergrads, and you kind of just have to figure it out on your own. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Before we do though, if you want to support the strike, feel free to check out this link or scan this QR code. A lot of you have heard about it. It's the reason why we're on Zoom right now. It's kind of an elephant in the room. If you want to support the fair treatment of like GSIs and other workers for the university that are not being treated fairly, you should definitely check this out and see in whatever way you want to support the strike, whether that be by signing a form or donating or whatever it may be. Just check this link out if you're interested. And then Megan, could you do me a solid? I can't see the chat. Oh, could you let me know if somebody types a question in the chat? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So for Astro students, many hours of coding is basically synonymous with research. At least as an undergrad, almost all your research is going to be spent coding. That's why we teach you Python in the first place. It's going to be relevant, not just in your classes, but in research. And in fact, one of the professors in the department once told me that he won't take anybody who doesn't know how to code in Python. Like it's just, and he's not going to teach you it. So if you don't know how to do it, you're not going to work with him. And that's the harsh reality of how it works. So yeah, so research is basically synonymous with coding, and like that's what we've been building up that skill for all of the semester. And now we're going to show you how to use that skill to get research, how to market yourself. But before we could do that, we need to explain the kind of like overall process of how research is done. So we always start research with a scientific question. This is like the scientific method, if you will. You start with some question or an idea that you want to investigate, and you want to seek it out. You want to understand what's going on. Maybe that might be, I want to understand how galaxies are forming, or maybe I want to understand that like some niche thing about like blah, 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 cosmology, or maybe I want to understand how magnetic fields work in this little subcase of a problem. That's up to you, whatever this problem may be. Usually, like your advisor will come up with that question for you, because we're not really at a point to know what questions are important yet. As undergrads, we're kind of not developed there. We don't have enough background on the field. We only know like the basic knowledge from our classes. But anyway, so that's the start. And then it could take one of three avenues, typically, at least in astronomy. You could either write a proposal and apply for some time on like a supercomputer or a telescope to collect data. Maybe that might be applying for the JWST or Hubble telescope time. And then you collect that data with your allocated time. If your proposal is a winning proposal, they'll give you time to take data to address a scientific question. And then with that data, you can analyze it and then write a paper. Similarly, there's lots of public data sets made available that are still being analyzed today because they're huge and massive. Gaia, for example, is a satellite or like an observatory that's observing in space right now, and it's looking at all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy, basically, collecting all sorts of data that is still being analyzed to this day. Even though it's publicly available, there's still hundreds and hundreds of papers being written all the time on all that data set because there's just so much to look at. So you can download a public data set taken by other people and analyze that data and write a paper about it. Or lastly, if you want to really be on like the cutting edge of astronomy, you can also build your own telescopes or build your own instruments and then take data with it. Then nobody else in the world will have that data. You will be making very like premier like data sets that you can use to analyze. And then again, you always have to analyze the data and then write a paper with like that's refereed by other scientists, peer reviewed in the sense that you can't just write, I found this solution to dark energy, I know quantum gravity, and then just write some hocus pocus BS and then call it a day and now you have the answer to dark energy. No, it has to be like real scientific research is peer reviewed, by other people in your field, other experts. They check your work, make sure it's valid, make sure it's the claims aren't unreasonable. And then once it's accepted by a reputable journal, then the journal will publish it. But this is the overall process. But you might be wondering, okay, well, I don't even know how to start this. Like what? Like, how do I even come up with a scientific question? How do I write a proposal? We were never taught that. I don't know what things are important to do. Where do I even start downloading public data? I don't know how to build a telescope. That's fair. And that's totally understandable. We're undergraduates. So typically undergraduates do this part with the guidance of an advisor. So an advisor is usually somebody who has been in the field long enough or been like in whatever field of study long enough that they know what questions are important to be asking. And they know how to write proposals to apply for time. Typically, Hubble telescope is not going to give proposal time to an undergraduate. You don't have a name, you don't have a history of work behind you. Whereas a professor has a reputable source, they're hired by a university, they're trusted to do great research. Typically, they're going to be the ones that are winning proposals and writing them. But once they have their goals in mind, then they have a much more strict, or not strict, but polished project outline for you to work on. And this isn't always going to be like a clear 1, 2, 3 step process, because research is inherently discovery. It's not like we know the answer beforehand. We have no idea what the answer is going to be, or maybe we have some idea, but it might be completely wrong. And you might have to go down different rabbit holes to figure out what the real answer is. So that's totally okay to explore, but they at least have an outline of what they want to do. So they might have they might like ask you to collect data with them. Like they might have gotten telescope time and you're in Alex Filippenko's group, for example, and you're collecting data with a telescope that you might analyze later. You might they might ask you to download this specific public data set from Gaia. Or the subset of the data, or maybe you're in an instrumentation group like Jessica Liu's group in the astronomy department, who builds adaptive optic instruments for telescopes like Keck at Mauna Kea. All of these are totally different research ideas or research avenues, but nonetheless, this is what undergrads do. And then in particular, undergrads are mainly good at the analysis part, the analyzing data. Typically, professors don't have time to sit down and code for many, many hours a week to be able to get crunch the numbers and understand what's going on. But undergrads are supposed to. Maybe we might not have the time, but we have to make the time to be able to, rise up that academic ladder. So this is what we're usually used for, analyzing data. But this is also the fun part. This is usually the part that professors wish they could be doing, but they have to do a bunch more logistical stuff like running a group, mentoring students, being on committees, and so on like that. So this is the kind of the fun part where you get to sink your teeth into the science bit. You get to be the ground zero when it comes to discovery. If you take a bunch of data, nobody really knows what the results of that data are going to be until somebody analyzes the data and says, okay, this is the claim that we can make with this data. This is the plot that shows that this is the trend that we're looking at. This is where the scientific discovery comes from. And you get to do this as an undergrad. And then if you could do it fast enough in your undergrad, you could write a paper about it, or somebody else will write a paper and you can help. And so writing a research paper is done entirely in Overleaf, which is really useful. We talk about Overleaf. That's why we have you write your CVs in Overleaf. That's why we have you write your project proposals in Overleaf. It's so that you at least build that skill, or at least it's not demystify what it is. It's not a completely new learning curve. You know what the tool is. You can learn how to teach yourself all the nitty-gritty details of what you need for a research paper, but you understand the idea of downloading a template. You understand the idea of how to use the math mode versus whatever the commands you might need. And you know where to look for help if you get stuck. So that is the last part. So typically undergrads do the analyzing of data with coding, lots and lots of Python coding, and then writing research papers that summarize their results. So this is what we're usually doing the most. Is there any questions about that so far? All right. Megan, please make sure to let me know if anybody types in the chat or something. Okay, let's continue going. So in astrophysics research or astronomy research, there's kind of 3 main overarching avenues you can go into. There's theoretical, observational, and instrumentation. In other fields, it's not just astronomy too. There's usually a theoretical approach to problems, maybe like a lab approach, and then an instrumentation approach, where instrumentation means you're developing instruments for general use. often with like a scientific goal. So like maybe you want to be able to look through that Earth's atmosphere that's really blurry. So you develop some a tool for the telescope to be able to cancel out the effects of the atmosphere. We call that adaptive optics. But in biology, this might be another instrument. This might be developing, I don't know, some sort of like MRI machine or whatever to be able to look through the body. I don't know. I'm not a biologist, but you get the idea. It's like developing the instruments. Observational astronomy is kind of unique because we can only look at things, but the counterpart to this in other fields might be laboratory work, experimental, usually, where you run experiments in a lab and you like getting hands-on with real data. You're like not just like, you're not purely in the theoretical, you're not building things for it, but you're actually like testing your experiments, testing your hypotheses and so on. In astronomy, we don't have labs. The universe is our lab. We look out with our eyes, our telescopes, to be able to study the universe. So this is collecting and analyzing observational data of stars, galaxies, black holes, you name it, whatever it may be. And then lastly, the big, the third like overarching avenue or branch of astronomy or astrophysics research is theoretical research. So this is like writing down pen and paper theories that might explain results, maybe computing giant computer simulation models that I've talked about in previous lectures to explain what we're seeing in nature. So those are the three kind of avenues. And again, theoretical isn't just unique to astronomy. It's in like tons of other fields, biology, physics, chemistry, you name it. So then these fields have overlap though. So in particular, for example, observational instrumentation have an overlap of experimental cosmology. So maybe you might not necessarily want to do the observing, but you're really good with like mechanical engineering and whatnot, and you want to build an instrument for cosmology. So we call experimental cosmology, like the people that build the probes and the satellites that, or like the telescopes that look out into the universe. For example, the like Planck satellite, which measured the afterglow of the Big Bang. That was all developed in a lab first through instrumentation, and then eventually used to study the universe. So that's kind of like where those overlap. Where you like build like dedicated instruments that have like a specific scientific goal. And then lastly is data, big data. That's us basically. A lot of astronomy comes from theoretical and observational merging together through data. So comparing analysis or like computational theories, analytic pen and paper theories to observations. And usually these observations in the age of new astronomy are huge data sets, gigabytes and gigabytes worth of data that need to be crunched, need to be like trends need to be found, fitting models. We talked about curve fitting. We talked about like differentiation, integration, all sorts of like numerical techniques to be able to understand data. We talked about all that. That's all used to try to understand observations and relate them to theoretical frameworks. Observing a star exploding in the sky just looks like a giant blob of light being like glowing in the sky. There's like, if I look up into the night sky and I'm Tycho Brahe or something, and I'm looking out and I see a bright light shine in the night sky, all I can tell is that it's a bright light. I don't have any explanation for that. But through theoretical frameworks, and many observational studies, we can develop an explanation for those observed quantities. So little did we know it was a star collapsing in on itself against gravity, and a giant supernova was formed. That would not necessarily, we would have no idea that was happening without some sort of theoretical framework to explain what we observe. So data is really important, and it's only getting more and more important as the data sets get bigger and bigger in astronomy. So being equipped with Python is a very valuable skill to be able to analyze that data, and makes you an extremely marketable resource for doing research. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll keep going. So the first part of any project, let's talk about it. That is getting background information. So once your advisor comes up with a question, you join their group. They're going to tell you, all right, you need to read, because otherwise you're going to have no idea what's going on. For example, you may go through your entire undergraduate curriculum. Maybe you'll take undergrad stars, undergrad fluid dynamics, undergrad this, but maybe you'll take all your E&M and your quantum mechanics and all this stuff. but they tell you the basic concepts that like govern physics, but they don't necessarily tell you the nitty-gritty details of a subfield. So maybe you study fluid dynamics and stars, but you have no idea about the nitty-gritty details of the Kappa mechanism that governs RR Lyrae stars. Nobody knows what that is. Maybe 100 people in the world know what that is, or 1,000 people in the world if it's a big field. But you need to get that background information so that you know what we're talking about. So to do that, typically they'll have you read really relevant papers in the literature. Luckily, you don't have to pay nowadays with the advent of our archives. So this is a preprint service. It's a giant server that hosts tons of research papers every day being published, except they're not published yet. This is the preprint. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. If you find a discovery on here, if it doesn't have a publication yet, it might not necessarily be the real, like it might not be peer reviewed, it might be incorrect. So it's just important to remember that these are preprints that allow the data to be more accessible, or the like science to be more accessible, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's peer reviewed and trusted yet. So just take that with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, they'll have you go down that rabbit hole, look at archive papers, as well as papers in the astrophysics data system, ADS for short. This is like the holy grail. This has all sorts of good stuff. You can generate bibliographies using research papers. All astronomers use it, and you can customize your search. So for example, if we look at archive, it looks like this. It was made by some folks at Cornell, like a decade or two ago. And it has not just astrophysics, but it also has math and like quantum physics. It has computer science. It has biology, finance, statistics, electrical engineering, economics, you name it. Even had like COVID-19 prints. So if you go to medRxiv, for example, you can look at a whole bunch of preprints for COVID related studies. And this is in fact how a lot of people were like getting all those results before they went through the peer review process. So not all of it was trusted and peer reviewed, but see, there was 25,000 articles written like just on COVID alone in the past 2 years. Not all of those have been reviewed by every single study or all the like top scientists, but nonetheless, it's important to have more science and more data available for the public to take a look at. And that's all free to look at. You could download any one of those. So anyway, we can look at anything. Why don't we go to astrophysics just in general? And we could pick on a subtopic. Maybe we could talk about, we'll look at galaxies. So let's look at new papers that just came out like today. So new submissions for Wednesday, the 16th. That is today. We can look at, new paper. This is actually really important for my research. So I'm going to look at this one. But feedback reshapes, blah, 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 some whatever. So if you want to look at their PDF, you can, or like the PDF of their like research, you can go ahead and click on the link. It'll take you, this is the abstract. This is like the kind of summary before you read. It's like to let you know what the whole thing is about. Excuse me, Nick, could you mute yourself? Or Megan, could you? Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. But the abstract kind of like summarizes the ideas of the paper before you even have to read it all. But if you want to take a closer look, typically the way we look at research papers is you open it up, you read the title, you maybe read the abstract first, so you get the idea of what the whole paper is about. And then you don't read any of this, you skip all this, and you look at the pictures. This is how we read papers in astronomy, to get a quick glimpse, because you're not going to be able to read 25 pages of a really technical paper. But if looking at this, I see baryon fraction, I see giant simulations, I see densities of dark matter, stars. I see, okay, this is a simulation-based paper talking about baryons. What are baryons? Well, that's background information. You can look that up, but nonetheless. And then I look at plots and I'm like, oh, okay, I see. And then I read this and I see it's a profile of some whatever, and it's statistics comparing different simulations. TNG's a simulation, Eagle's a simulation, Simba's a simulation. So it's comparing a bunch of statistics between simulations. I got that within, a minute or two. It's not going to be like the same speed for every paper. Some papers are more dense than others, but nonetheless, you go ahead and you look at all the plots first before you read really anything. And then you skip everything else, and then you go to the conclusions, actually, right here, summary and conclusions. And they summarize at a higher level all of the points made in the paper. And then once you do all of that, if you really want to be ambitious to build up your background understanding, you read the introduction that talks about the background, like kind of concepts of the paper. Or maybe you read the introduction, then the conclusion, it's up to you. But typically at some point, you don't even keep reading the introductions because even that takes a long time. So this is how professors and postdocs can read papers within like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes instead of 10 hours. I mean, if I were to read this whole thing in depth, it's 19 pages of super dense technical material on astrophysics. Like, oh my God, it's like worse than the SATs and GREs. But nonetheless, you only read all this little nitty gritty detail if you're like trying to like replicate the results or do a study that's very, very similar. Typically, you never really want to read the details unless you absolutely don't believe what they're talking about. But if what they talk about makes sense based off of their like kind of their like overview and their figures and whatnot, then you probably don't need to read the nitty gritty details unless you want to. So anyway, that's like all from arXiv. That's the preprint service. But you'll notice that it's not necessarily published yet. It just came out, so they're still awaiting approval. Like it's not peer reviewed, so take it with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, there's like tons of papers coming out every day. Like these are literally, there's 30 papers that came out today that are being submitted right now, all of which are completely different. I know this astronomer, and it's like honestly a good habit if you want to like really build up your like background knowledge of astronomy to like go through arXiv and read abstracts every day, like 4 or 5 of them. But that's a lot to ask of somebody. It's really dense and complicated, so you're never expected to do that. But anyway, your advisor will have you go down a whole rabbit hole relevant to your research. They'll send you a bunch of links to look at papers, and you'll have to read them, usually at a surface level first to get the ideas, and then you can read them more in depth as needed. And then lastly, I want to show you the NASA ADS version. So this is a bit more complete. It's the astrophysics data system. This is mainly for people studying astronomy, but they also have a physics background. So if you're interested in physics as well, that's really relevant. But you could search by like authors, like typically it looks like this. You could search by author, first author, abstract, etc. So maybe I want to find a paper that has Raphael Bayer-Way in it. A paper. Oh, no, it's because I did it backwards because you're, yeah. What? Yeah, or yeah. What if I just did this? You should be in here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so if we look, here's a paper that Raphael was on. Where is he? Here he is, Bayer-Way right here. So I could find this paper, and then similarly, they provide arXiv links as well as publisher links. So if you go ahead and look at like the publisher link, it'll take you to the journal that was published in. And so you can like click on the PDF if you have access. Like you need to be like signed in with like your Berkeley account, and you need to go through this like easy proxy to look at it. But if you don't want to pay, you could just go to the arXiv. Usually the arXiv is supposed to be like updated almost as much as the journal. It might not be 100% as updated, but nonetheless, you could still look at the paper this way, and it's free. But when you cite, you want to cite from the other one. You want to cite from the ADS, not arXiv, because arXiv is preprints, and you want to cite their published work. But anyway, you can look at this whole paper that Raphael was on, and you can like look at all the stuff, like all that. And this might be relevant to some really niche topic, literally like platform for period detection and time series period, like RLI array stars. Like it's a very like niche topic that you would probably have no background information on, and that's okay. That's the whole point of research. You're like, as research gets more and more complicated, as the questions get more and more sophisticated, the research gets more and more niche, and you need a lot more background information to keep up with whatever it is. And that's totally fine. That's how research works. So is there any questions on reading literature? So this is like always step one of any project. Like your advisor will have you come onto the project and just start reading a bunch of papers. Usually it'll be like 5 to 10, maybe 15 background papers so that you are acquainted with the background knowledge of the topic you're going to be working on for your project. Any questions on that? Okay, that's fine. All right, we'll keep going. So how do we do this part? The collect data, download public data, build new telescope and instrument data, or like build new instruments, telescopes to take data. Well, Clara has made a really good like resource for all of you for your final projects, which has a bunch of links. But For example, we have a bunch of like real data acquisition links. For example, like Vizier is like an entire service for downloading tables from research papers and catalogs of stars and galaxies and stuff. Sinbad is like another very similar thing, database for basic information of a target. Maybe it's RA and DEC coordinates in the sky and like all that good stuff, brightness of the object and stuff. There's the Gaia archive, like I mentioned earlier. You could download tons of data from here that has like photometry, which is like brightness studies, and it has like galactic astronomy, like a bunch of stuff within our Milky Way galaxy. You could always get your own data if your advisor has access to their own telescopes or whatever, like the Filipenko group might have at Berkeley or whatever it may be. Maybe like if you're in Courtney Dressing's group, you might take data with the Shane or JWST or something like that. And then you can always use AstroPy to query the data as well, and we provide a link here. I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritty details of each and every one of them, but I'll show you like one example here with Vizier. This is, again, very astronomy related, but if you want, you can search Vizier like with like catalogs. So maybe maybe we'll search 1987A, a really famous supernova, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of data that I could click on here and download. There's like catalogs of data for 1987A, which is like a really famous supernova that I can click on. There's like notes on it and stuff, and a whole bunch of information. I don't really use this for my own research, so I'm not particularly super familiar, but there's tons of links. There's links to papers. This one might be a little outdated, but nonetheless, you can like take a look, and it has like data from like different like catalog papers or whatever. Granted, 1987A is a kind of old supernova, discovered in 87. So it's been studied to death. So a lot of the data was made available before this service. But if you know what you want, you can take a look. And then Sinbad's also linked on this website as well. They're like basically one and the same. So you can also search.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got a question?
Oh no, just real quick adding on to that. If you're doing your literature review and search, you can often find objects that are linked on like ADS or something to like a thing on a Vizier catalog. So if you're like looking for a thing that might be interesting and trying to find more data on it, it's often like all integrated, which makes your life easier.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like these services are really useful. It's not super important that you know exactly how to use them right now. So don't worry about like, oh my God, there's so much information on the screen. We're just pointing you to them in case your advisor or somebody is like asked, okay, we need to download data from this. You're like, oh, I've seen this before. I know that there's like a rough idea of like what it is. It's not like completely foreign to me, and I can like come look at it and learn about it myself. We're just pointing you towards these services, so you at least have heard of them going into research, but you don't need to know how to use them by any means, and we're not going to make you unless you want to. But nonetheless, it is valuable, and there's some other stuff here. But anyway, that's just an example of like Vizier and Sinbad, which are giant catalogs. Gaia is really cool. Gaia has like a whole query-based website where you can like download data. I would not recommend downloading the entire data set. Don't download the whole Gaia data set. It's absolutely massive, but you could search for data based on different whatever, like you can search by name or by coordinates or whatever. You can have like advanced searching and all that crazy stuff. It's not super important, all the nitty-gritty details of that. You can always Google how to do that, or like ask somebody individually, but like nonetheless, just knowing that this is here for you to look at is incredibly valuable. So that's publicly available too. You don't need to pay to do that. You can use this for free. Gaia is 100% free to use. So that's really useful. Cool. So that's data acquisition. So that's just going back to what we talked about. That's this part: collecting data, downloading public data, or like building new instruments and stuff. Obviously, we can't show you how to build new data, but Claire will talk about, or how to build new instruments, but Claire will talk about that later when we talk about like individual research experiences. So then another like avenue is like simulations. So this is my bread and butter. That's why I want to talk about it. I love simulations. It's my thing. And I think a lot of you get that by now based off the other lectures and like the video game lecture and stuff. I think simulations are really fun, and it's like a good way to use your Python knowledge or other coding. But premier research like simulations that are used to like do actual studies of the universe are very complicated. I taught you all the basics of them in a couple lectures prior, but nonetheless, like the physics that you have to code in is very complicated, and typically these phenomena are so extreme that you have to come up with really sophisticated algorithms to be able to handle all the computations. So you can run them yourself, but usually you need to use supercomputers, like really, really big computers that are really expensive to run all the physics, like simulating a black hole, for example. That simulating a black hole slipping of a gas accurately requires a huge amount of computational time that is just not feasible on a laptop. There's really cool software packages you can use to run your own complex simulations. Mesa is a really cool simulation code for stellar, like simulating stars. Athena++ is really good for magnetohydrodynamics. I actually came across a really cool package that you could use called Daedalus, or the Daedalus project. This is entirely made in Python. So you could actually simulate really cool stuff in Python, and it's like fluid dynamics. If you go to tutorials and examples, for example, if you want to simulate like convection in a star, this is all you have to do. Like you import the Python package and you can literally, this package simulates like differential equations simultaneously, and you can get something that looks just like this. Simulating in your on your laptop environment in Python, which is crazy. So this is like convection of a star. This is like fluids bubbling around, like convection, like when you have bubbles on a stovetop when you're boiling water, that's like convection. This is like happening inside of a star, and you could literally simulate that on your laptop. So this is like the Daedalus project is a really cool project developed by, I think it was a guy from Berkeley, but nonetheless, that is like, this is a really cool project. You could look at like galleries and stuff of different simulations like this one, which have like rotating convection, and like you could do active matter, like a bacteria on a ball, for example. This is another kind of simulation. So you can see the bacteria kind of swarming around on the surface of a sphere, and they have links to papers and stuff. But these are all just examples of different numerical simulations that you can run that use all the same principles that we've taught you in this course, like object-oriented programming and using while loops to simulate and all that good stuff of like the game writing lecture. That's all done under the hood there. But these like simulations are really expensive, and if you want, you could download their simulation data, like for example, the illustrious TNG simulation that like simulates the entire universe. That's where this bottom right panel comes from. That's like just one star basically, or galaxy forming inside of this giant simulation volume. These things take months and months, if not a year, to run on the world's biggest supercomputers, which are equivalent to hundreds of thousands of laptops being run simultaneously all together to compute the physics. So these are like really, really huge scale simulations that you can use their data and try to analyze and make studies with. So that's just a little tidbit on simulations, which also goes into the whole this whole region, collecting data, downloading public data, and building new instruments and stuff. So simulations kind of fit into like collecting new data or analyzing others' data. And then most of the semester we spent learning how to analyze data. That's like literally everything we've talked about. The whole course is geared around this blue box for you, because that's what's the most important for an undergrad, to be able to analyze that data. You're not going to be expected to run your own super complicated simulations anytime soon, unless you want to pursue that avenue. Typically what you're going to be doing is analyzing other people's data, other people's simulations, other people's telescope time data like collected, maybe pictures of stars, of galaxies or whatever, and trying to get meaningful results out of it. That's typically what we're doing. And we feel that we've taught you all the basics of Python, and then we taught you how to plot. A plot is worth 1,000 words. And the most, like I mentioned, when I read a research paper, when anybody reads a research paper, they don't read all the nitty-gritty writing. They look at the plots. So being able to make effective plots based on that show like key trends or key results in your work is incredibly important. And we try to make sure we showcase that, and how to fit models to data and so on like that. So that's what we've been focusing on this semester. And we hope that you feel confident going into any research project, being able to at least have the skills to handle analyzing data. And we show you a little bit of simulations and stuff going into the middle here, but mainly the blue is what's more important. And then we also show you a little bit of the green as well in terms of like being able to write with LaTeX. Cool. And then so you can just going back to like how theoretical astrophysics is like directly tied to observational astrophysics. Here is a picture of M87. Like we actually took a picture of it with a telescope the size of the Earth, the Event Horizon Telescope. This is a real image of a black hole. It's like literally so small that you can't even fathom how small it is in the sky. I think it's something like smaller than a grain of sand at arm's length, like or more. I think it's probably smaller than that too in the night sky. Like we needed such a big telescope that it was roughly the size of the Earth. And we did that with some crazy techniques. If you want to talk about that, I'm happy to answer questions on that. But we took a real image of a black hole, and then we took a simulation of a black hole with with gas being sucked up into the black hole. And then we blurred the simulation. You'll see that they're almost identical, very, very similar. And in fact, the predictions of Einstein's general theory of relativity are so strong that they predicted what we would see out of a black hole, and that literally 100 years after his death, we took a picture, or 100 years after the theory came out, we took a picture of a black hole, something that Einstein never thought would ever happen, which is crazy to think about. So that's just one example of how analyzing data, comparing real image data to simulation data kind of allows you to make really big claims about, the validity of general relativity, how gravity works, black holes. That's all something that we can do. Just one example of how you can use the techniques that we've talked about or like coding and stuff to be able to make discoveries and compare data to theoretical predictions. Cool. So, and then, can you guess what we use for this step? That's overleaf and LaTeX to write a research paper. I kind of jumped the gun on that one, but nonetheless, we use LaTeX and overleaf to like share our results with other people. That's the industry standard. So knowing how to use LaTeX, showing people how to use LaTeX, or showing that you know how to use it in your CV already is like a really valuable skill that people look for. So we use overleaf to be able to write our research papers and stuff and share our findings. Before I move on, is there any questions about anything I've talked about the whole lecture? Also, just curious, can everybody hear me just fine? Like everything's good, right? Thumbs up.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Cool. All right. So if there's no questions, then we'll move on to the next segment. We only have 5 minutes left, so it's not that much. But we want to show you some at least from the instructors, like some research examples / a panel. So if you have questions about research, we're going to happy to talk about them. So I'll go first, and then I think Raphael and then Claire will go. And if there's any other instructors who I only saw 3 slides, but if any other instructors would like to share, they're more than welcome to. So really briefly, this is like my 1 minute slide of like everything I do. I'm a 5th year now. This needs to be updated. 5th year undergrad. I have like 3 kind of avenues of research. I like to do stellar astrophysics observations, cosmological morphology, so like studying the large scale structures of our universe, and then high performance algorithms. I have 3 different advisors from 3 different schools, and those are like all topics I really like. I like coming up with crazy fast algorithms to be able to make use statistics to our advantage and stuff like that. I like doing numerical simulations as well. This was my ULab project, for example. If you're interested in or thinking about ULab, you can do some pretty cool stuff there. Really, I've loved my ULab experiences. If you want to talk about that, so that's just kind of like a broad overview of what I do for my research. And then I think Rafi will go next.
So briefly, I do research on the late time emission of supernova. So I work in Alex Filipenko's group, and I investigate supernova 1, 2, 5, 10 years later, investigating things like light echoes, late time emission and stuff. So this GIF here is supernova 2012 AW over 10 years. So you see how initially the supernova is very much the brightest thing, but then this echo develops, which literally means the light is being bent by dust around it to create this ring. So that's super cool. I really like investigating supernova because it tells us a lot about our galaxy, about dust, and of course, supernova are important for cosmology in general. Just a brief note about how I got my research. So I cold emailed Alex Filipenko about 15 times over the course of 3 semesters. So I think that's actually, those slides are after this. So hopefully we get to them, but if we don't, just know that there are tips on how to send one of those emails. But the biggest thing is just don't be scared. Like, professors are nice, they'll respond, they won't judge you. Like, I know you think like, oh, I gotta focus on every word. Like, as long as you express your interest and enthusiasm, you'll be considered at least, and they'll either take you or they'll say apply next semester or go to this or that professor. But yeah, just a brief note on that. And then besides the supernova research, I also work on variable stars, which is that paper that James was showing, where we were able to develop a pipeline that helps find the period of these variable stars. But yeah, that's my research.
And then Claire, I think, is next.
Yeah, so so far we've talked, projects have been more in like the data analysis zone. So like for a little bit of a change of pace, I've done some stuff in the past that's more like just processing data, like analyzing light curves and trying to look for exoplanet transits. So if I know like there's some groups that have been looking at doing photometry for like their final projects, that's like something I have a little bit of experience in. So can ask about that. Other than that, though, most of what I've done so far is like instrumentation work. So if you're curious about that, feel free to ask. Some of it's been for like dark matter search projects on the ground. But what I'm currently working on has been doing like electronics design for an instrument that will be flying on a satellite that SSL is working on. So feel free to ask about that. But like, long story short, even though it does obviously take like electronics knowledge and working with like hardware, there's still a lot of coding and data analysis that goes into it, because we simulate like we have to analyze like data that like this board or these instruments will be able to handle, how we'll be able to process it. We do a lot of like testing in the lab with this data too. So like, and we also do a lot of simulating for like the conditions that these things will have to go through, how they'll be oriented or positioned, how that affects like the requirements for the electronics and all that. It like all, like James said, all the things that we talked about intersect. Like Python's obviously a very helpful tool for doing a lot of this. So like, feel free to ask outside of it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. I think I realize we're like super close to the end. So we'll save questions.
Wait,
What?
Pranati has a slide too.
Oh, Pranati does? Okay, cool.
Okay, I
Yeah.
don't think my slide is showing up here, but that is totally okay.
Here,
My
you can,
research,
here, I can get it up. Give me 1 second.
I don't know. I think it's because I like edited it later,
That's-
but it's totally okay.
Sorry. Where is it? Oh no.
Wait, let's hope. Did I put it right?
There
Okay.
you are.
Perfect. Okay, so my research is studying space weather. So I'm basically looking at how there's like different interactions in the ionosphere, and those are affected by lower atmospheric weather. I'm using NASA ICON data, and it's literally like a data analysis. It's entirely data analysis. It's all done in Python, and all I'm doing is making different like statistical models to figure out the trends in the data, and hopefully I'll be using that to build a predictor. And I got it through the data science discovery program, which was a really cool opportunity that I found through my data science classes. So yeah, if anybody's interested about like knowing how that works, feel free to reach out. And yeah.
Awesome. And then is there anybody else who has stuff? I think this is Claire's stuff.
No, that's mine, but we're like overtime. So if anyone has questions, they can just talk to me about it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there is a couple little things I wanted to say before we go. I apologize for going over time, but this is probably the most important part of the whole lecture. So sorry, everybody. Just bear with me for like 2 minutes. And then we'll stick around and answer questions if anybody wants to ask questions. Sorry. So the art of a cold email. This is incredibly important. Like if this is like the one thing you take away that you go into like leaving with this is like the one thing I want you to take away. Art of a cold email. The 4 main points Personalized, not generic. That means people could tell when you're bullshitting. Don't put in, or like, and you don't put in effort. If you want them to respond well, you need to personalize your email, meaning you cater it to that person in particular. Show that you care about your research or care about their research. Don't just say, I want to work with you because I think you're cool. Say, I want to work with you because I find this research topic that you developed in this paper really cool. If if you show them that you took the time to read their research paper, that's immediately 100% way more likely that you are going to be that they're going to take you seriously. So it looks way more like, look deeper than the surface of the person. Try to find a paper that they've written recently that you think is cool and skim it. You don't have to read it in depth. I would not recommend that. Maybe try to find a question about it. Don't try to grill them as if you're interrogating them, but maybe like, I thought this was really cool and I was just curious, would you be available to meet to talk about this? And if they say yes, or if you like have a back and forth dialogue with questions, that immediately makes them shows them that you have like a inquisitive side, that you are curious, and that's what they're looking for as well. So being able to do your research and like look at a study they've done, a research paper that you find really interesting, goes a long way. Another thing, email postdocs, not professors. So typically full professors are super busy and they don't make great mentors because they have little time for you. I don't want to say that's the case for every professor, but I would say that postdocs tend to have way more time, far more time to work with you. They don't have to worry about all of the logistics of bureaucracy in the university and handling committees and planning this and teaching classes. Postdocs are literally at the peak of their game. They just finished their PhD. They just finished their thesis. They're an expert in what they do, and they're out to do lots of great research to be able to become a professor. So they're still climbing the ladder. They're hungry. They want to be able to make lots of studies, and they're going to be willing to put a lot more time into like help you understand your research. And they actually know how to code still. A lot of professors you'll find haven't coded since IDL since IDL was the language of choice instead of Python, which is like over a decade ago. And that's not their fault or anything. It's just that they're busy doing other matters that are, I think, that are more important at their stage of their career than sitting down and coding analysis. But postdocs still use Python on a daily basis. So it's important I would recommend trying to get projects with postdocs, and then they'll link you to their professors that they're serving under. So the letters of rec will come naturally if you apply to work with postdocs or like cold email them, and they're much more receptive to emails. Okay, lastly, make their life as easy as possible. Flex that website. You can learn more about me at whatever.com or set at the bottom header of your email. So if you have like a link to your website, just like there's a way in Google emails to like have a custom like footer for your emails. Not bottom header, a footer for the email, where it's like signs like blah, 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 this is my website. And then lastly, link your CV in your academic unofficial transcript. There's a reason we had you make your websites and your CVs. There's a reason for that. It's because when you send an email, you need to send those out. Mainly the CV is the most important thing. They need people to see what you've done, to see your experience, to see whether or not you could even work on a project that they have for you. If you need more background, what classes you've taken. These are all really important. So also link your academic unofficial transcript. That's just your B courses academic summary. It's free. You don't have to do anything. You just go to B courses, click academic summary and print. That's just fine. They don't need to see the official transcript or anything like that. They just need to see what classes you've taken. So send that also in the email, like just attach those as well. And so that they can take a look and see what you've done, to see if you're like competitive, or to see if you have the background knowledge that they need. And if not, then they can make a project that caters towards you as well if they have time. So these are kind of the 4 fundamental points that I want to emphasize when you're writing a cold email. If you take these into account, so far I have never heard of anybody getting rejected if they've followed all 4 of these. At least rejected by everybody. Some professors might be busy, they don't have funding to take on a student. That's fine. That's totally understandable. But like I seriously, I think it's very hard. If you follow this through and through, it's very hard to get rejected. If you really take the time to carefully do each one of these like different points and take that seriously in your cold emails. Generic is the bane of existence. Make sure it's personalized to the person you're writing an email to. They can tell half-assedly. And then lastly, if you're looking for research for opportunities, ULab is great. I've done ULab for 2 years. I was a mentee and a mentor. It's a year-long student-run research program. You could start in the fall next year. And it's really great for starting out if you're not really confident in like being able to like go right into premier level research. It's more like toy research in the sense that you're working with an undergrad mentor, not a graduate student or a postdoc or anything like that. But it usually builds up your fundamentals of research and skills and whatnot. Also, URAP is really competitive, but it's great. You could do paid research with really cool faculty like Saul Perlmutter, like Nobel Prize winner or whatever. Like one of the previous DeCal instructors, Isla, worked with Saul Perlmutter through URAP, and that was a great experience for her. Cold emailing is what I just mentioned on the previous slide, and then research fairs at the start of each semester. Stay tuned for that. REUs are super competitive. These are research experiences for undergrads. They're super competitive, but they're awesome summer research programs where you get to go out to another university. They fly you out. You get to stay there at the university to work on research, and you get paid to do so, which is really, really fun. I would recommend that if anybody wants to have a great experience doing research, apply for REUs as well. And then get on email lists for your department. Sometimes postdocs will be like, I have a research project that I need help on, and they'll send an email and ask people to advertise it. So get on those email lists and it'll help. And that's everything I have for all that stuff. So sorry for going severely over. I realize it's almost 10 minutes over, but I want to make sure that we said all that. And if anybody has questions, we'll stick around, but that's everything we have to share for today's lecture. Thank you everybody for coming and supporting us online.